snaking its way across Europe's eastern coastline. The Atlantic Wall stretches from France's border with Spain in the south, all the way to the northern tip of Norway, creating the most impressive defensive line of fortifications known to man. In order to understand the purpose and the necessity of the Atlantic Wall, we have to look back to Western Europe in June of 1940 and the end of the Battle of France. By this time, the German war machine had taken control of Poland in 1939 and Denmark and Norway in mid-1940, expanding the Germans' area of control all the way to the English Channel. It's difficult to truly understand just how massive an area Germany controlled until we look at this area on the map. It's only now we can appreciate why the defence of the European coastline was so important. This truly vast expanse was highly exposed and vulnerable. With Great Britain showing no signs of backing down, the threat from across the Channel was a serious concern. Hitler's gamble of Britain agreeing to end hostilities after the capture of France had backfired, with the steadfast resolve of Prime Minister Winston Churchill in continuing the fight no matter what. This placed Hitler in a position he had hoped he would never be, in a continuing war with the island nation. If we look back further in history to the pre-war years, Hitler and the Nazis had held Great Britain in high esteem, drawing many parallels between the two nations and in many ways admiring the empire. As a sidebar, it shouldn't be lost on anyone that Hitler had an avid interest in and knowledge of history. He would have been well aware of Britain's history, particularly the fact that the name England is deeply rooted in the nation's early medieval history, deriving from the Old English name Engleland, which translates to Land of the Angles. These Angles, alongside Saxons and Jutes, were Germanic tribes from the continental coastlines, primarily modern-day Denmark and northern Germany. To Hitler and the Nazis, Great Britain had always been a potential ally up to this point, but with the refusal to capitulate, the outcome was inevitable, ultimately leading to the drafting of Operation Sea Lion and the necessity to shore up defences on the Western Front. It is incredibly interesting to discuss Operation Sea Lion in this series as Germany's own D-Day. It is a subject that will be looked into in greater detail in the future, so for now we will lightly touch on the subject just to provide context. Planning for Operation Sea Lion had already begun in July of 1940, with preparations for the invasion implemented as early as the end of July. One of the key components of the planned invasion was complete German control of the Channel and the proposed landing sites by both the Navy and the Air Force. Neither was ever achieved at any stage during the conflict, with Britain's legendary naval forces and its outstanding RAF battling doggedly to defend their island. The defeat of the Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine left significant risks to the coastlines of mainland Europe, with the battles of Narvik in 1940, commando raids in June of 1941, and notably the disaster at Dieppe on the 19th of August 1942. It was clear that the coast had to be protected. Very soon after the commando raids, Hitler's attention was drawn to two very small islands in the Channel, the islands of Jersey and Guernsey. These would serve as fortified defensive positions to protect the mainland from incursion. Almost immediately, additional troops were ordered to the islands, and the lack of coastal artillery was addressed with the ordered construction of between 200 and 250 strong points. and later, in October of 1941, the decision to make the islands impregnable fortresses was made, and so the coastal belt of defences and the concept of coastal fortresses was conceived. The first time the notion of an Atlantic wall came to fruition was on the 23rd of March of 1942, with Hitler's Führer Directive No. 40, which called for the creation of an Atlantic wall. The directive initially called for strong fortifications to be concentrated around naval bases, submarine bases, and ports. This would ultimately lead to a defensive line that was truly terrifying in its construction. Fortifications of the coast would continue in earnest. In addition to these locations, strong points would be established at key locations including Amsterdam, near Rotterdam, Dunkirk, Calais, Boulogne-sur-Mer, Le Havre, Cherbourg, Saint-Malo, Brest, Saint-Nazaire, and Le Palais. From a military and historical standpoint, this cannot be understated. This string of fortifications were the likes never before seen in conflict, eclipsing even the Western Front during the First World War. A complete interlocking defensive line of bunkers, artillery, machine guns, minefields, obstacles, entrenched infantry fighting positions, and predetermined killing grounds. As we look at the Atlantic Wall in November of 1943, the legendary Desert Fox Erwin Rommel, mythologised by the British and Germans alike, was placed in charge of the Atlantic Wall from Denmark all the way to Brittany. As Rommel assumed his command, he was dismayed to see that the Atlantic Wall was far from the legendary armoured belt which all had been led to believe. The wall had cracks, a great many. A new revolutionary officer such as Rommel saw this and in turn set about making the Atlantic Wall as formidable as it was rumoured to be. Rommel's vision? A 6-mile deep death barrier. So how was Rommel to achieve this? Well, all the resources and manpower he needed were readily available. Not only was Rommel an outstanding officer, he was also very pragmatic. His solution was to hire the very people whose land had been occupied, the French. Rommel knew well how to incentivise, even a population under control. As he reportedly explained, pay them well and promptly for it. Point out that the enemy is least likely to invade where the most obstacles have been erected. And so, it could be said that the biggest obstacle to the liberation of France was in fact the very people the Allies intended to liberate. Rommel was under no illusion that the responsibility of creating an impregnable Atlantic wall was no small task. In another statement, he showed a knowledge of warfare that would be eerily prophetic to future conflicts. He would state, "I want anti-personnel mines, anti-tank mines, anti-paratroop mines. I want mines to sink ships and mines to sink landing craft. I want mines that detonate when a wire is tripped, mines that explode when a wire is cut, mines that can be remote controlled, and mines that will blow up when a beam of light is interrupted." We are lucky enough to have access to various historical maps which show just how this defensive plan would be implemented. On these maps of Sword and Omaha Beach, we have on the bottom left hand side the key to show just what defences the Allies would likely encounter and how they would be positioned. In order to truly understand the incredible task ahead of the young men landing on these beaches, we are going to take a closer look at these defences. We will not be including the individual weapons or kit of the infantry soldiers or the mobile elements such as armour or artillery, as these will be covered in later videos. But instead, for this series we will focus on the obstacles and weapons which made up the Atlantic Wall. As we start below the waterline, we see rows of wooden poles or Hemmelbakken. Driven into the sand, these poles were typically between 4 and 5 metres long and often supported by other logs. They were designed to disable landing craft, and they would have been fitted with telemines. A very crude but very effective obstacle, the Hemmelbakken was a major contributing factor into the Allied planners opting for a low tide landing. An interesting obstacle that could also be expected to be found intermingled in the first line of obstacles is Element C, probably better known as the Belgian Gate. These 1-ton angled steel constructions stood up to 3 metres tall and were primarily intended to block the advance of armour and disable landing craft. We can see reference to Element C in planning maps and reconnaissance photos of Normandy beaches. However, they were also widely used further inland alongside Czech hedgehogs and tetrahedrons. These two obstacles are very similar in their design and purpose. Though the shape is different, the principles are still the same. Constructed of either angled steel, rails, or reinforced concrete, these obstacles were the staple of beach defences during D-Day and have made frequent appearances in TV, film, and video games. The concept behind the Czech hedgehog and tetrahedrons was to hinder landing craft and armour. The shapes of these obstacles would make them extremely difficult to be knocked over, and in the case they were, the design would allow for the obstacles to continue acting just as effectively. As the Allied forces continued to fight their way up the beaches, through barbed wire entanglements and scattered minefields, they would have experienced withering fire from all directions. If we look at one very specific area, the Veerville exit of Omaha Beach, made famous in recent times due to its media exposure, we can see the main defensive line in detail using this overlay. With this, we can truly appreciate the scale of defences. If we take the overlay as a rough guide and not verbatim, we can count 15 MGs, which we could presume to be either the MG42 or the MG34, in either the light or heavy role. The concentration of fire that would be raining down on the advancing troops from approximately 15 MG42s would be staggering. And if that wasn't enough, the beach would be under continual shelling from mortars and artillery, both inland and coastal. We know there is a Tobruk mortar pit here and an open air mortar pit, which we could presume to be the 81mm Granatwerfer 34. But that isn't all the artillery in the area. Alongside various guns of smaller calibre, we have a formidable 88mm Flak 43 emplacement. This gun's trajectory travels almost flat out to approximately 910 metres. The line of sight offered by this emplacement was a serious danger to Allied landing forces, vehicles and craft. And the final element of this fortified area we will discuss is the 50mm Flak 41 anti-aircraft gun, used in the direct fire role from this bunker. The interesting point to note is the casement in which it was housed. It was a double embrasure encasement, which meant the gun could pivot on its mount to fire both ways along the beach, raining down its 22.5kg HE shells at a rate of around 180 rounds per minute. Hitler's Atlantic Wall wasn't perfect. It wasn't impregnable. The forces Germany had were not utilised correctly for the defence. Yet the Atlantic Wall is arguably the best known and well preserved element from this page of history. and it stands strong today as a reminder to all of the horrors of war and the true cost of the actions of a small group of people. Hello viewers. So, at the time of writing the script for episode 2 here, I actually went ahead and I've booked a trip over to the Normandy beaches in May. We're going over there for 7 days on a work trip to get some footage, get some recording, get some scripting done, basically plan out quite a few of the upcoming episodes, because from now what we want to start doing is looking at each beach individually. We're going to be doing an episode on each of the beaches, then possibly from there do an episode on the D-Day objectives, or maybe the post-D-Day objectives, like the primary objectives, the initial objectives. We're also going to be covering the airborne landings, but I don't know if I want to make that a separate series yet. But anyway, what it means for us being in France in May is it does mean that we're going to be able to get a lot of shorts done in real time. We're going to be able to do a good mix of live streams, maybe some scripted stuff where we give you a talk on certain points, certain locations, certain vehicles or anything that we see. And again, anything that we see on the fly, we could just get a video knocked up right there and then. It's also going to give us a lot of footage then for the future series episodes. So like for the beaches, we'll have some real actual on the scene footage. And not only that, that's one of the reasons why we're going. Again, it's been a lifetime dream of mine to go to the D-Day beaches, and what better time to do it? I kind of figured if I don't do it now, I never will. You know, this is kind of where I'm committing myself to at the moment, so this is where I'm putting all of my eggs, really. The other factor is, yeah, it's nice as well to be able to share the experience with the viewers, but also it gives me a chance to get there and see exactly what these men were going through during these operations. I mean, I'm a military veteran myself. I've been in frontline combat. I was when I was 19, so probably about the same age as the guys that were doing this. But as much as I thought I knew what combat's like and what military operations are like and all this, you just can't understand just what it was like. And through the course of scripting this series, it really has resonated with me that these young men, barely boys, must have been terrified. So I know for a fact, even now at my age, if I was to go there in that scenario, I would be petrified, absolutely terrified. And I don't think that comes across in a lot of documentaries. I don't even think film or TV really gets it right, because at the end of the day, it's still just a film or a program. So what I want to start doing, and especially start bringing into this channel, is telling some of the stories of these guys, you know, and in the wider scheme of things when it comes to other series and other videos, the men, the women, you know, the children, how the war affected everyone, how everyone who served or contributed to the war did so. So I'd like to impart a little bit of a human side to my videos going forward. And so hopefully, in the coming weeks, there'll be a lot more new videos for you. So I do appreciate you standing by, because I know I'm not the quickest. I'm just not very good at this at the moment. I really not. I am learning. But on that note, thank you for your support. Thank you for sticking with us. And I will leave you with saying take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video, guys.